All 14 of the world's 8,000-meter peaks have one thing in common. They're brutally hard to climb. You need skill, endurance, and insane willpower. But that's not all. You also need money, and sometimes, a lot of it. This is a full ranking of every 8,000-er, from the cheapest climb out there to the ones that can cost a small fortune. I've searched through the most recent seasons to find the lowest expedition costs available. Not just full-service luxury setups, but the cheapest legit options you can get. I will also show what climbers typically pay if they go with a standard commercial expedition, and for those going premium, just how high the price can really go. As the list climbs higher, so do the prices, and by the end, things get crazy. So stick around. You might just find out which peak is actually within reach, and which one will drain your bank account. We start our journey with the most affordable of the 8,000-meter giants, Gasherbrum II. Gasherbrum II is often considered the most accessible of the 8,000-meter giants, and not just in terms of climbing. It also holds the title of the cheapest. The lowest cost I found was just under $7,000. That covers transport to the mountain, climbing permits, porters, and full logistics to get you settled at the base camp. From there, you're on your own. No Sherpa guides, no oxygen, no logistics. It's a setup designed for experienced, self-sufficient climbers who just need the infrastructure to get started. For a full-service expedition, with guides, high-altitude support, meals, gear, and oxygen included, the price jumps to around $15,000 to $20,000. Some pay more, especially with Western companies or if extra oxygen and personal Sherpas are added. But even then, it's often one of the most affordable 8,000-meter peaks out there. There are a few reasons for that. First, the mountain is considered less technical than most of its neighbors, so guiding costs stay lower. Second, Pakistan's permit fees have often been discounted, or in some cases, even waived, to attract climbers. And finally, the logistics are shared. The approach to base camp runs through the Bel Toro Glacier, the same route used for K2 and nearby Gasherbrum I. Many operators combine resources, which helps bring prices down. In the end, it's still a remote, high-altitude expedition. But if you're looking to summit an 8,000-er without burning through your savings, Gasherbrum II is where most climbers start. Next up is Gasherbrum I, just a few kilometers from its sibling, but a different beast entirely. It's higher, more technical, and surprisingly, not that much more expensive. Let's take a look. Gasherbrum I sits just next door to G2, and in a lot of ways their price tags go hand in hand. At 8,080 meters, it's slightly higher and considered more technical, but the cost of climbing it is nearly identical. Base camp service for G1 typically runs around $7,000. That includes transport, permits, porters, and shared infrastructure at base camp. But like G2, that's where the support ends. Above that, you're climbing independently. A fully guided expedition with summit support, high-altitude porters, meals, and usually basic oxygen comes in around $15,000 to $20,000. Some pay more if they go with Western-led teams, but most climbers opt for local logistics on this one, keeping the cost lower. Gasherbrum I benefits from the same cost-saving structure as its neighbor. The approach is the same, up the Bel Toro Glacier, and some operators even offer combo packages for both peaks at a discount. Pakistan's group permit system also helps. In some cases, 7 climbers can share one permit, driving down the per-person cost. Technically, it's a tougher mountain. Fewer climbers, steeper sections, and more work required to fix ropes along the route. But in the big picture, the access, infrastructure, and permit fees keep Gasherbrum I firmly in the low-cost tier of 8,000-meter expeditions. We're still deep in the Karakoram, but now heading for a peak that's taller, busier, and far more exposed. Broad Peak might not have the fame of K2 next door, but it brings its own serious challenges. Let's take a look. Broad Peak shares the same valley as K2. Same brutal weather, same long approach, but its price stays surprisingly low. The cheapest full-service climb I found comes in around $7,300. That's for a budget package run by a local operator, covering base camp support, a guide, food, and group equipment. It's bare bones and usually requires a minimum team size, but it's still a full expedition to over 8,000 meters. Most climbers pay somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000, depending on the level of support. That includes guides, logistics at all camps, food, Sherpa or high-altitude support, and sometimes basic oxygen. Premium climbs, with smaller teams, Western guides, or added perks, can push well past 25 grand, and some teams even pair Broad Peak with K2, running both summits in a single expedition. So why is Broad Peak still considered affordable? First, the permit is significantly cheaper than K2's, and it's been discounted in recent years. Second, the route to base camp is shared with multiple expeditions, so transport costs are split. And finally, while Broad Peak isn't easy, it's less technical than many other 8,000-meter peaks, which keeps guide intensity and oxygen needs lower. It's still exposed, still high, and definitely not to be underestimated, but as far as cost goes, Broad Peak remains one of the best value climbs in the death zone. Now we're heading for the one that needs no introduction. It's higher, harder, and far more dangerous than anything we've seen so far. And yes, it's more expensive too. Time to face K2, the Savage Mountain, and the second highest mountain in the world. K2 is known for being deadly, remote, and brutally technical. But surprisingly, it doesn't have to be expensive, at least not at the entry level. The cheapest way onto K2 starts at just under $7,800. That gets you a permit, a long trek to base camp, food, and basic infrastructure once you get there. No guides, no oxygen, no summit support, just the bare minimum needed to give you a shot. But make no mistake, this kind of budget climb is only for elite, fully self-sufficient mountaineers. On the other end of the scale, full-service expeditions range from around $18,000 to well over $50,000. Standard packages usually include one climbing Sherpa per client, oxygen, group gear, and high-altitude logistics. Mid-tier Western teams charge more for smaller ratios and personalized guidance, and at the very top, luxury expeditions with helicopters, extra oxygen, and one-to-one guide support can run well over $100,000. So why is K2 cheap at the bottom end? Until recently, Pakistan charged a flat group permit fee, meaning large teams could split the cost dramatically. Even with the switch to per-person pricing, the fee is still a fraction of Everest's. And local teams rely on experienced Pakistani staff and Nepali Sherpas who operate at lower cost than Western guides. Still, this is K2. The danger is real, the technical climbing is relentless, and the margin for error is razor thin. Going cheap here is possible, but for most, surviving this mountain means investing in serious backup. From one legendary giant to another, this next peak is just as dangerous, but far more isolated. Known as the Killer Mountain, Nanga Parbat has a brutal history and a price tag that doesn't reflect how deadly it really is. Let's head there. Nanga Parbat is in a world of its own, far from the busy Karakoram, standing alone on the western edge of the Himalayas. It's earned the name Killer Mountain for good reason. And while it doesn't see many climbers, the ones who do show up know what they're in for. The cheapest way to climb Nanga Parbat is through a logistics-only setup. No guide, no summit support, just a permit, access, and basic infrastructure that can cost between $8,000 to $10,000, depending on the team size and route. You're covering the government permit, a liaison officer, mules or porters, and base camp staff. But once you leave base camp, you're on your own, and that's a serious thing on this mountain. Full-service climbs here are more expensive than most Pakistani peaks. Expect to pay anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000. That covers guided support, Sherpas or high-altitude porters, rope fixing, extra acclimatization time, and all logistics through either the Rupal or Daimir face. Some trips run cheaper if you join a larger group on the easier route, but most guided expeditions are smaller, more cautious, and more bespoke, which drives the price up. The costs add up for a few reasons. Access is harder. Nanga Parbat is remote, with fewer trails and less infrastructure than the Karakoram. It's also significantly more dangerous. Avalanche-prone slopes, steep technical walls, and a long history of fatal accidents mean guides take fewer risks and need more time on the mountain. The permit is also more expensive than the Gasherbrums, or Broad Peak, And with fewer climbers, there's less opportunity to split costs. Nanga Parbat isn't just physically demanding, it's logistically intense and unforgiving, and if you want to do it right, it won't come cheap. From the lonely flanks of Nanga Parbat, we cross the border into Nepal and head toward one of the most popular 8,000-meter giants in the world. Manaslu has a different reputation entirely. Fewer dangers, more climbers, but also a growing price tag. Let's dive in. Manaslu is often called the starter 8,000 air, and in terms of price, it definitely fits that label. With high competition among Nepali outfitters and strong infrastructure, it's one of the most affordable big peaks in Nepal. At the low end, a base camp logistics-only climb starts around $8,500. That includes the permit, trek-in, food, tents, staff, and transport, everything up to base camp. But above that, it's a DIY mission. No Sherpa support, no oxygen, no guidance, unless you hire those extras separately. Most climbers, though, go for a full-service package. Prices range from $12,000 to $20,000, depending on the outfitter and level of support. Standard guided climbs including Sherpa support, oxygen, food, gear transport, and tents on the mountain often land around $15,000. Some premium operators push into the $25,000 to $35,000 range, especially with Western guides and smaller team ratios. So why is Manaslu relatively cheap? It's a combination of factors: a moderate permit fee, $1,800 in spring, or just $900 in autumn, plus a straightforward approach and lots of competition. You can reach it relatively quick, the route is well established, and Sherpa teams fix ropes each season for the entire climbing window. That infrastructure gets reused by dozens of teams, keeping guide costs down. Even amenities like Kathmandu hotels and base camp Wi-Fi are often bundled in, making this climb feel more like a packaged expedition than a rugged adventure. Manaslu may not be easy, it's still over 8,000 meters, but thanks to scale, demand, and relatively tame logistics, it's one of the most budget-friendly ways to reach the death zone. Now we shift from one of the most popular 8,000ers to one of the most overlooked. Lhotse is the fourth highest mountain in the world, and it shares nearly the entire route with Everest. But the price? That's a different story. Let's break it down. The cheapest way to climb Lhotse starts around $8,500. That's for base camp access and shared logistics, where you essentially join an Everest expedition's infrastructure. You get the permit, trek, base camp support, and access to all the fixed ropes up to Camp 3. Above that, you peel off the Everest route and head for the Lhotse summit, usually without a personal guide unless you hire one separately. Most climbers, though, go full service, and for that, you're looking at $20,000 to $40,000. Nepali operators tend to offer guided climbs in the $18,000 to $25,000 range, with Sherpa support, oxygen, and all camps included. Western guided climbs push it higher, especially if you are not tagging it onto an Everest expedition. Some Everest climbers add Lhotse for an extra $15,000, making the combo more efficient for both time and cost. So why does Lhotse stay relatively affordable? Because it rides Everest's coattails. You're using the same route through the Khumbu Icefall, the same tents at Camp 2, and the same ropes fixed up the Lhotse face. Even the medical tents, weather reports, and base camp amenities are already in place, paid for by Everest clients. You still need solid high-altitude experience, and summit day from the Lhotse couloir is no joke. But in terms of value, Lhotse is Everest's more low-key sibling, with many of the same logistics, at a fraction of the cost. Now we leave the Everest corridor behind and head deeper into the eastern Himalaya. Makalu is taller, tougher, and far more remote, and the price reflects that. Fewer climbers, more logistics, and serious altitude. Let's take a look. Makalu isn't just one of the highest peaks on Earth, it's also one of the steepest. Its remote location and brutal summit pyramid make it a serious climb, and that shows in the cost. The cheapest way up starts around $9,000. That gets you the permit, the long trek in, base camp logistics, food, tents, and staff, but nothing above base camp. There's no guide, no oxygen, no support on the mountain unless you pay extra. You're paying for the groundwork and then climbing solo or with your own team from Camp 1 upward. For a full service climb, prices range from $20,000 to $30,000. Most Nepali operators offer full board packages around $25,000, with a personal Sherpa, oxygen, high camp gear, and full support. Western-led teams go higher, often $35,000 or more, since the mountain demands a low climber-to-guide ratio and a strong technical team. Makalu costs more for a few clear reasons. It's remote. Getting there means flying to Tumbling Tar and then trekking in for days, or paying big for a helicopter. There's almost no commercial infrastructure, so every load has to be carried in, and the climb itself? Brutal. Steep snow, technical ice, and real exposure in the summit pyramid. You need more rope, more time, and more Sherpa support, which all adds up. Still, local Nepali outfitters have brought prices down compared to a decade ago. What used to be a $40,000 plus climb is now doable in the mid-$20,000 range with experienced local teams. Makalu isn't for beginners, but for serious climbers, it's one of the most respected summits in the Himalaya. Now we head west to one of Nepal's most intimidating peaks. It's massive, remote, and brutally steep, and not nearly as commercialized as its eastern neighbors. Dhaulagiri is next. Dhaulagiri is steep, remote, and serious, one of Nepal's most underrated 8,000ers. And for about $9,000, you can buy into a basic expedition that gets you to base camp with full support. That includes the permit, approach trek or jeep transport, tents and food at base, and staff on site. But above base camp, you're on your own. No Sherpa, no oxygen, and no help unless you pay for it. For a full-service expedition, the typical range is $25,000 to $35,000. Nepali companies have been advertising guided climbs for as low as $20,000, though those often leave out important extras like contingency oxygen or summit bonuses. More realistically, most solid local teams run climbs in the high 20,000s. Western-led expeditions can run north of $30,000, especially if they include small ratios or bespoke support. Why so expensive? First, the approach is brutal. Several days of trekking through tough, avalanche-prone terrain. The French pass route is steep and isolated, and if you want to avoid it, you'll need a helicopter drop, which is expensive and logistically tricky. The climb itself is serious. Dhaulagiri has steep camps, dangerous seracs, and a history of high fatality rates. Guides need to bring more rope, more Sherpas, and more oxygen to stay safe. And unlike Manaslu or Everest, you might be one of only 2 or 3 teams on the mountain that season, meaning fewer people to share fixed line duties or base camp infrastructure. Despite all this, Nepali outfitters have been offering aggressive pricing, around $20,000 for full service, hoping to bring more climbers to this underappreciated giant. But make no mistake, Dhaulagiri is big, wild, and hard, and cutting corners here can get expensive, fast. Next up, one of the deadliest mountains in history. It may not be the tallest, but its danger is legendary and the price tag reflects the risk. Let's talk about Annapurna. It's not the tallest 8,000er, but it's earned one of the worst reputations. Annapurna has one of the highest fatality rates in mountaineering history. Avalanche danger, unstable slopes, and unpredictable weather make this peak infamous and expensive. The cheapest possible way to get on Annapurna is around $10,000, but only if you split costs with a team and go bare bones. That might get you the permit, transport to base camp, tents, cooks, and staff support. But no personal Sherpa, no oxygen, and no real margin for error. It's a risky move, only suited to experienced climbers who are self-sufficient and used to extreme danger. For most climbers, full-service expeditions run between $30,000 and $45,000. That typically includes high-altitude Sherpa support, multiple bottles of oxygen, and complete camp infrastructure. The logistics have to be airtight because Annapurna doesn't forgive mistakes. There's no crowd to follow here. Fewer teams means you often fix ropes yourself or split the entire cost with 1 or 2 groups. That adds up fast. Guides also demand higher pay here, and rightfully so. With so many historical tragedies on the mountain, Sherpas know the risks are real. Plus, operators often build in contingency days and even rescue budgets, knowing that weather or avalanche conditions can force rapid evacuations. The route has shifted in recent years, with most climbers now attempting the north face. But it's still steep, serac-prone, and exposed. Even the approach trek isn't simple, sometimes requiring special vehicle hires or charter flights. In short, you don't cut corners on Annapurna, And if you're paying to climb it, you're paying for survival. Now we're heading east to one of the most isolated giants in the Himalayas. Few climbers go there, and even fewer make it to the top. Next up is Kangchenjunga, the third highest mountain in the world, and one of the most remote and demanding 8,000ers you can attempt. Even if you're trying to go bare bones, it's not cheap. A minimal team-based expedition with just the basics might come in around $15,000 per person, and that's if you're splitting logistics with a larger group and cutting a few corners, like going light on oxygen or climbing with a higher Sherpa to client ratio. But unlike some other peaks, there's really no stripped-down, base camp-only option here. The terrain and scale demand at least some form of guided setup, especially for safety. In reality, most climbers end up paying closer to $18,000 to $20,000, even on the low end. Go full service, and things scale up fast. Most Nepali-led expeditions range from $30,000 to $40,000, with some rare outliers dipping just below that if it's a big team with minimal extras. On the high end, Western guided climbs, often highly bespoke, can hit $45,000 or more, especially when operators include longer itineraries, extra oxygen, and personalized support. So what makes Kangchenjunga so pricey? First, it's incredibly remote. The trek to base camp alone can take more than 10 days through rugged terrain with minimal infrastructure, meaning more porters, higher transport costs, and a ton of advanced planning. Second, the climb itself is long and technically difficult. There are typically 4 high camps, unstable weather patterns, and a lot of rope work needed to protect the route. You're often climbing with very few other teams, maybe 10 to 15 climbers on the whole mountain per season, so there's little to no cost sharing for things like route fixing or weather support. All of this means your team has to carry the full load: infrastructure, safety measures, Sherpa support, and even emergency contingency planning. And that's why Kangchenjunga ends up near the top of the price list, just below the most expensive 8,000-meter monsters. And with Kangchenjunga wrapped, we leave the wild, remote east of Nepal and head to Tibet. Shishapangma is next, the only 8,000-meter peak located entirely within China, and for many, one of the most elusive due to access restrictions in recent years. It's considered one of the more accessible climbs in terms of technical difficulty, but that doesn't mean it's cheap or simple to get to. On the low end, recent quotes suggest a budget full-service expedition might cost around $16,800 per person. That typically includes the Chinese permit, overland transport from Nepal, base camp support, and a Sherpa-guided climb, though at that price, oxygen might be limited, and the team size likely needs to be fairly large to keep costs down. Given the bureaucratic hurdles of climbing in Tibet, this is about as minimal as it gets. On the full-service side, prices usually fall between $30,000 and $50,000, depending on the level of support and who's organizing the trip. The higher end often reflects smaller teams, better oxygen coverage, and more personalized logistics. Mid-range options are more common, and still include a complete support package from base camp to summit. So why the cost? First, access is tightly controlled. All foreign expeditions to Shishapangma must go through an official Chinese partner, which bundles together things like transportation, yaks, base camp setup, liaison officers, and more, with limited room to customize or cut corners. The overland journey from Nepal or flights via Lhotse add to the expense, and everything needs to be coordinated through the China-Tibet Mountaineering Association. Then there's the summit itself. While the standard route is relatively straightforward, the true summit, the highest point at 8,027 meters, lies beyond a narrow ridge that requires additional rope work and extra care. Many expeditions in the past stopped at the central summit, but serious teams now aim for the true top, which can increase time, risk, and cost. In short, Shishapangma may be technically easier than some of the giants, but between the tightly controlled logistics and the effort needed to reach the true summit, it still commands a significant price tag. Now, from one Tibetan giant to another, let's move over to Cho Oyu, the 6th highest mountain in the world, and often seen as the most accessible of the 8,000ers. For long known as one of the easier 8,000ers in terms of technical difficulty, but these days, it's far from a budget climb. Even the most basic full-service expedition will set you back around $30,000. That's assuming a large team and cost-sharing setup, covering your climbing permit, yaks for gear, overland transport through Tibet, a Sherpa-guided climb, and all base camp logistics. Unlike Nepal, where services can be pieced together, Cho Oyu's Tibet route operates under bundled logistics and Chinese regulations, so there's little room to trim things down. Sub-$30,000 climbs are virtually non-existent now. On the full service end, prices range from $40,000 to $60,000, depending on the level of support. Standard guided climbs tend to land around the mid-40Ks, while high-end or rapid ascent packages, complete with oxygen tents and shorter itineraries, push into the 50 to 60K range. And during the years Cho Oyu was closed, some operators attempted technical routes from the Nepal side, but these expeditions cost just as much, if not more, than the classic route in Tibet. So why the steep cost? Permits and logistics out of Tibet are tightly controlled and expensive. Chinese liaison officers, yak caravans, and convoy travel all come at fixed prices, with little flexibility for negotiation. Add in accommodation in places like Lhotse or Shigatse for acclimatization, and it's clear you're paying for the bureaucracy and infrastructure as much as the mountain, while the climb itself is relatively straightforward compared to peaks like Annapurna or Makalu. Cho Oyu is no longer the starter 8,000er it used to be, at least not price-wise. From Cho Oyu, we lift off across the border and drift east, flying straight toward the roof of the world, Everest, the final mountain, the most iconic and easily the most expensive 8,000er to climb, the highest mountain on Earth. Even on a budget, Everest demands serious cash. The absolute floor sits around $33,000, and that's for a bare-bones Nepali-led expedition with no frills. You'll get the essentials: a permit, a tent at base camp, basic oxygen, maybe 3 bottles, and 1 shared Sherpa to help get you up the mountain. Don't expect luxuries here. You might be carrying your own gear to high camps, sleeping in packed tents, and paying extra for every add-on, but it's a real expedition and it can get you to the top if you're strong, lucky, and weather holds. Most climbers, though, go with a full-service setup, and that's where Everest stretches the budget. The typical all-inclusive expedition runs $50,000 to $70,000 that covers a Sherpa for summit day, 5 to 8 bottles of oxygen, tents at all camps, food, communications, insurance, the whole works. Western guided climbs often sit in the $70,000 to $85,000 range, especially with smaller team sizes and more personalized support. At the very top of the spectrum, things get wild. VIP packages with private chefs, heated tents, unlimited oxygen, and even Wi-Fi at Camp 2 can cost over $120,000. Flash expeditions, where you pre-acclimatize at home and fly in for a faster summit bid, are priced around $100,000 or more. Everest has become a choose-your-own adventure, if you can afford it. So why is it so expensive? Simple. Everest has the most infrastructure, the most staff, and the highest permit fees, recently bumped to $15,000 per person. The Khumbu icefall has to be maintained with ladders and ropes every season. Supplemental oxygen costs thousands. There's a liaison officer to pay, a trash deposit, a fixed rope contribution, porters, cooks, insurance, flights to Lukla. Everything adds up. And when you multiply it across 6 to 8 weeks on the mountain, with multiple high camps and dozens of support staff, it becomes clear Everest is a massive operation. But despite the price, people keep coming. Because this isn't just another mountain. It's Everest, the top of the world, and climbing it is the ultimate goal for thousands of mountaineers. If you're chasing that summit photo, it's going to cost you more than any other peak on the planet. So, after all that, here's the real question. Are these prices justified? Or is this whole world of high-altitude climbing just insane? Let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dive breakdowns, and share it with anyone who's ever dreamed of standing on top of the world. And if you've ever wondered what the highest unclimbed mountains in the world are, that's exactly what I cover in this video. Check it out.